Chapter 1, Hermetic Philosophy. So, the first part of this chapter talks about the character Hermes Trismegistus and how a lot of the origins of these teachings come from Egypt, and culturally, they viewed him as the god Thoth, or they revered him to the point of making him one of their deities. He is considered the master of masters and the god of scribes. It is said that a lot of esoteric and occult teachings stem from Egypt under the name Hermes Trismegistus, because that name was there since the dawn of its civilization, of its heyday. I know that there are other civilizations that were great that existed before ancient Egypt, but I see Egypt as one of the most recent checkpoints and one of the main roots for all modern occultism and esoteric arts. I personally don't know that much about ancient Egyptian culture, but I do agree that a lot of modern understandings of magic have its roots in Egypt. And I am not so familiar with the names of the deities, but I know enough to understand that a lot of the archetypes that we see today in the form of gods from other cultures do stem from ancient Egypt. One of the warnings that was passed on from the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus was that these teachings, the Hermetic philosophy, was never really meant to be a religion, and it didn't belong to any specific creed. Like, it shouldn't belong to a specific group of people, but it is open to anybody who is willing to come forward and try to understand it. I know that in ancient Egypt, they had a very low literacy rate, and the act of writing and reading was considered magic itself. So they would only pass it on to the people who they thought had the potential to understand. In our modern day, there are far more people who are literate in at least Western society, and therefore I think that there are a lot of people in the Western world who should be able to grasp these teachings. The teachings of Hermes Trismegistus was referred to as the Kybalion, and even though the etymology of the word has been lost to time, the Kybalion is a word that I see that encompasses Hermes's teachings. As I've pointed out before, this was originally an oral tradition and it was passed verbally from teacher to student. That means that it is meant to be alive in the minds of these people, and the teachings are more nuanced to each person. There are some core aspects of these philosophies that are ever enduring, such as the seven principles, but the way that they are applied is different from person to person. I'm assuming that each person will find examples for themselves that work to help them understand these different principles. Sometimes the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus was written, but it was often written in code. The reason why they coded it wasn't just so that only the initiated could understand. I think that it was written in code because a lot of these teachings are meant to be more abstract instead of cut and dry. And so if you use symbols and symbolism to communicate these teachings to others, they will have their own personal nuanced understanding of these teachings because these symbols have particular meaning to the person who sees them. It is said that the art of Hermetic alchemy is meant to be more mental than it is physical. That is to say, it is alchemy of the mind, or transmuting the way that we think about things instead of transmuting physical objects like the stereotype of alchemists turning lead into gold. Instead, we can think of that more symbolically and think of the lead as rigid logic and understanding into a more spiritually whole and pure understanding. This is especially evident in the first principle of Hermetic philosophy, which is the principle of mentalism, that the all is mind and the universe is mental. They figured out that understanding the mysteries of the mind and understanding the way that we think about things helps us transform the world around us. When we want the world outside to transform, it first starts with the way that we think, the way that we transform our thought patterns. I'll point out that we're moving into a new age where we're becoming more technologically advanced, and we are facing new problems that the world hasn't really faced before. I mean, I think that they've been faced, but in a lesser degree. But because we are expanding and growing so rapidly as a species in terms of our humanity and our technology, it is presenting us a lot of growing pains and problems that we should all come together to try to solve. And that comes from understanding each other and the way that each individual person thinks.